Hey Intro Kids, this is Mrs. Gardner, and this is to help you with starting your sculpted mask. And so here's a basic setup, like if you're at school especially, but we'd have this tray that's labeled, but it's okay if you don't have that. You can have newspaper down, you have a wet bin that's half full of water, and warmer water does make the plaster setup quicker, which can be helpful sometimes. Cooler water just gives you more time. And then we have a dry bin that's more shallow, and that's where you can put the roll of plaster. It's like bandaging, it's gauze bandaging that has plaster embedded in it, just like you would put on a cast if you broke your arm at the doctor's. And the roll kind of rolls off in there so it doesn't roll off the table. And you want to always keep the wet separate from the dry. You don't want to drip over the bandaging because that'll cause dead spots in it that won't work. Okay? Because the water activates the bandaging to plaster so that it starts to set up after 10 or 15 minutes or so. Here's my mold, and it's good to have your name on the inside with tape. And it doesn't have to be perfectly clean. If it has some old markings on it, like let's say this old China marker here or crayon, and people who want to kind of have guidelines, you can rub it off with a dry paper towel if you want to. That's an optional thing. You don't have to put guidelines. But if you're doing a half mask, some people like to design it so that they know exactly where they want to end the mask. Even if a half mask, you would still have this form underneath just to give you some support and guidelines. Okay, so let's say I want to make the eye like that, like a hole. You can decide whether you want to go completely over closed like a decorative mask where you can't see through it, or if you want it to have openings or whatnot. So you have a lot of choices on this. So to get started, you can cut bandages ahead of time like you see right here. Some people do that. Bigger bandages are fine if you have a big area to do. A lot of people cut some that are more workable where you can smooth it down easier. So the basic technique is holding it on the corners so you can keep full control of it, and immersing it in the water completely, like all the way down and in. Now you don't want to wash off the plaster, of course, you need it on there. But now if it's really wet and drippy, some people even they have some extra newspaper and they kind of like dab it off on it, but most people just work like this. Now if I wanted a nice, clean, strong edge to this, I would perhaps fold this under while it's wet, take it all the way down to the bottom wall of this form, and then kind of just smooth it down, just like almost like paper mache, same kind of technique. Now if I want it real smooth, I'll even have circular movements like that with my finger to kind of fill in some of the plaster. Now here's one I already wetted before, so I'm going to go ahead and use that one before it sets up and becomes unusable. It was kind of a big piece, and it kind of goes over the eye a little bit that I don't want, so I can just fold it back. I don't have to cut it. Just fold it back and make it extra strong right there. It's actually even better. Now it's a nice folded edge that doesn't have any frayed little threads and fibers coming off. Now again, if you want to make it real smooth, now's the time to kind of just quickly get the hang of circular motions if you want to fill in those little pits. Okay, I'll get another piece that's already cut. Immerse it completely in the water. Kind of get some of the dribbles off of there. And let's see, if I wanted this to be an opening, don't cover it up now and say, oh, I'll come back and cut it out later when it's dry. That is super hard to do because this stuff's really strong when it's dry and cured. So I'm going to avoid covering that area since I'm just planning on making one that has an open kind of design to it. Here's a little tiny piece, but I'll go ahead and use it. Now, if water had dripped on this accidentally, this dry plaster, like let's say yesterday, I can kind of feel it, maybe there's a dead spot there, then it does hurt the plaster bandaging. It means that it's dead plaster where it won't go through that chemical reaction and then stiffen up. I think that piece is okay. I can kind of use my fingernails and model it a little bit. Get a little bit more. Immerse it completely, dribble it off like that. And you basically just keep on going, just like you would with paper mache. And rub it, layer it, overlap it, and such. Now, this is called a flange, this edge of the mold. It's really good if you want to have a mask that maybe has cardboard pieces, like maybe you want to put a crown on this later. Well, it'd be nice to have something to glue to, so you can make your plaster come down, the bandaging come down onto that flange that sticks out to give it, something to hot glue to later when it's dry. You can hot glue and do all kinds of things to dry plaster. Like here's let me get this one out of the way. Here's dry plaster. You can see from the day before. If you were going to add plaster to this, that's called dead plaster. It doesn't want to bond to the fresh stuff anymore. Let's say you want to continue right here. And it's going to overlap some of this. I would get Elmer's glue and just drizzle it on the old dry dead plaster. Rub it on there so it's more receptive. Not on the mask, just on the dry plaster. And then I could, from there, this one's kind of big, I'm going to cut it a little bit more just to show you. Immerse it completely, dribble it off a little bit. And then I could, let's say I want to make it bigger, I can just keep on going. So you don't have to do it all in one sitting or anything like that. Okay, I'm going to make it circular movements just so I can kind of smooth it out a little bit. You can also sculpt with it. I'm going to do a little bit of that. That's how I made the eyebrows of this one, because in this project you don't want to just have it be exactly like everybody else's. There are some different masks, but some of them are pretty similar. You want to do some sculpting, whether that means adding like a little horn here, whether that means like this, adding an eyebrow. But basically you take a wetted piece. Let's just say I'm going to add something right here. Maybe I'm going to fill this in really thick, kind of like one of those Star Trek people where they have like a thick area there. I could, let's say I have a little glue already there, so that's okay. Maybe a little bit more glue, because there's some old dead plaster right there. Okay. I could kind of scrunch it down and just loosely push it on there like that, which looks really messy, I know right now, but then kind of pack it tighter and tighter. It's almost like modeling with clay. So I could make this do what I kind of want it to do. I can purposely just sculpt it. That's why we call it Sculpted Mask. We don't want to look like everybody else's. So you have to figure out, design what makes it different from everybody else's. Okay, so you can kind of sculpt, not just cover it. Petroleum jelly is good if you're doing on a life casting, like on someone's arm or face. Mine would have a little bit of that, just so things come off. We usually don't put petroleum jelly on these because they pop off pretty easy. Not too bad. And my dry bin, remember, keep it separate from the wet bin so you don't have water hurting the old plaster. Here's my grease pencil if you want to mark on the plaster, but crayon at home works fine for that. Here's what it kind of looks like when you get it. I think that's all the tools I need to show you. Use old scissors. Modeling tool is optional. You can always use your fingernails for that. And the liquid glue again is when you come back the second time and you have the dead plaster and you want to keep adding to it. Okay, so I think that'll get you started. See you in class.